My daughter whispered it, but loud enough for her friends to hear. "He's embarrassing. Can he just not be here?" I stood in the hallway with a tray of sandwiches I'd made for her birthday. The girls giggled, pretending not to notice me. But I noticed everything. The eye rolls, the way she waved me off like a fly. That was my house, my kitchen. I built the swing in the yard they took selfies on. I turned, hands trembling, and walked back to my room. That night, something in me quietly broke. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below and don't forget to press the subscribe button. I still remember the first time she called me Daddy after her mother passed. She was 10. Her voice was soft, almost testing the word like it might fall apart if she spoke it too loudly. Marjorie had only been gone a week. Cancer took her fast. Too fast. One moment we were building garden boxes together, and the next I was a widower with a daughter who couldn't sleep through the night. Those early months were filled with long silences. I wasn't the talking kind, but I learned. I learned how to braid hair from a YouTube video, learned how to cook something other than eggs and toast. She hated eggs. I let her pick the groceries just so she'd smile again. At night she'd curl up in our bed, well, mine now, with her little knees digging into my side and her tiny hand wrapped around my arm like it was her last anchor in the world. I'd stare at the ceiling, whispering stories about how her mom used to dance in the kitchen, barefoot, twirling with a spoon in her hand. The years that followed weren't easy, but they were full. Every morning I'd pack her lunch, always cut the crusts off, just how she liked it. Worked double shifts at the paper mill, came home just in time to help with homework. We had this thing where we'd watch one episode of Little House on the Prairie before bed. She said it made her feel safe. She was sweet back then. Always made a card for every birthday, even if it was just paper and crayons. On Father's Day, she'd make me pancakes in the shape of animals, or at least she tried. Most looked like blobs, but I'd smile and eat every bite. When she turned 16, I sold my truck to help pay for driving lessons. Told her it was time for me to start walking more anyway. Rosa, our maid, who had started part-time by then, joked that I was getting healthier by being poorer. I laughed, but the truth was, I never minded giving up anything for my daughter. She got into college, the first in our family to do so. I was proud, told everyone at the diner about it, showed off her acceptance letter like it was a trophy. We drove to the campus together. I carried her bags up 4 flights of stairs while she gave me a tour she clearly rehearsed. At the dorm, she hugged me, tight, said, "I'll miss you, Daddy." I cried the whole drive home, kept her room just the way it was. Posters, books, even the old stuffed bear named Buttons that Marjorie had stitched for her. When she came home that first summer, things felt different. She started calling me Dad instead of Daddy. Small thing, but I noticed. She didn't want to go to the diner with me anymore, said it was too old school. I still made her favorite pancakes, though she barely touched them. She'd wake up late, scroll through her phone and sigh whenever I asked her anything. I figured she was just tired, or maybe growing up meant growing apart. Still, I held on. Every Friday, I'd clean the house, polish the floor, and place fresh flowers in a vase by her mother's photo. I wanted her to feel welcome, always. This house, my hands built parts of it, and my love kept it warm. It wasn't just walls and floors. It was our history, our memories. Rosa, by then, had become more than just a housekeeper. She was someone who knew the rhythm of the home. She noticed when my hands shook after long days, made soup when I had a cough. She never said much, but sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with something like pity, or maybe kindness. My daughter liked Rosa at first, but once she started bringing friends over, something changed. She stopped introducing her, or me, told them Rosa was just staff and that I was resting. I didn't mind being called old. Age never scared me, but I never thought I'd become invisible, especially not in the home I fought to hold together. Back in those good years, I used to think love was enough, that if you gave and gave, eventually you'd be cherished in return. Now I know, sometimes love turns to dust in another person's hands. And even still, I remember the little girl who held my finger at her mother's funeral, squeezing it so tight I thought it'd break. That girl, she's somewhere in there. I just don't know if I'll ever see her again. The first time I noticed it, it was barely more than a shrug. She had come home for winter break, suitcase dragging behind her like she couldn't be bothered to lift it. I stood in the doorway, arms wide, heart full. She gave me a half hug, barely touched my shoulder. "Hey," she said, glancing over me like she was already scanning the room for something better. "Good trip?" I asked. "Long," she muttered, stepping inside. "Where's Rosa? I need her to help me unpack." Rosa, bless her, had been in the kitchen, humming while she folded napkins for dinner. She came out, wiped her hands on her apron and smiled. "Welcome home, Miss Lily." "Yeah," my daughter said, brushing past her. "I've got a lot of stuff this time." "No, thank you." No smile. Rosa looked at me, her lips parting slightly like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Just nodded and followed her up the stairs. Later that evening I made her favorite, beef stew, the kind her mother used to make. I even sliced the bread the way she liked, thin, crusty, toasted with a little butter. I set the table, lit the candle in the middle, and waited. She didn't come down. "Lily?" I called up the stairs. She responded after a pause. "I already ate. I'm going out. I told you yesterday." I hadn't heard a word about it. I sat there alone, staring at the candle as the stew cooled. Rosa joined me after a while. She didn't say anything at first, just picked up her spoon and ate in silence beside me. It was a small kindness, one I'd come to cherish more than I should have. The next few weeks were a blur of slammed doors and excuses. I tried asking her about school, her classes, if she needed anything, money, supplies, books. She always replied the same way. "It's fine, Dad. You wouldn't understand." It was the way she said Dad that got to me, like it was a name she was slowly trying to forget how to say. She rolled her eyes more often, like everything I did annoyed her. If I played my old records too loud while cleaning, she'd close her door with a loud thud. If I asked her to help rake leaves or tidy up the porch, she'd huff and say, "Why do we still live like this? It's not the 1950s." But the most painful part wasn't the words, it was the distance. I'd find her scrolling through her phone while Rosa washed dishes right next to her. She'd scroll past Rosa like she was invisible. Sometimes I'd watch them in the kitchen, Rosa doing all the work, while Lily leaned against the counter, texting, never lifting a hand to help. Once, I caught Rosa rubbing her lower back after mopping the floor. I offered to finish it, but Rosa just smiled and said, "You've done enough for this house, Mr. Wilson. Some things don't change." But things were changing. Rapidly. Lily began inviting her college friends over more often. They'd swarm the house with perfume and laughter and loud music. I tried staying out of their way, mostly in my room or outside in the shed, but I could hear the comments. "Your dad still lives here? I thought you had your own place now." "Wait, who's that lady in the apron?" "She's like our housekeeper, and yeah," Lily would sigh, "my dad's still hanging around." Hanging around, like an old jacket no one wanted to throw away, but no one wanted to wear either. One evening, I overheard her in the living room, telling her friends, "I've been trying to convince him to move into one of those retirement places. He's got the money. This house could be amazing if I could just update it." That word, update, felt like a knife. Update the house. Remove the old man and the memories. Paint over the past with something sleeker, shinier. I didn't say anything that night. Just sat outside on the porch, watching the wind twist the leaves in the yard Marjorie and I had planted decades ago. When Lily left for school again, she didn't hug me goodbye. Just waved and said, "Try not to scare Rosa away. I need her to keep the place clean while I'm gone." Rosa, who'd been standing quietly nearby, glanced at me with those warm, tired eyes of hers. After the door closed, I turned to her. "You ever think she'll come back? Not just here, but back to herself?" Rosa paused, looking down at the floor, then shook her head slowly. "Sometimes people don't come back. Sometimes they grow into someone else." I nodded. I didn't blame Rosa for her honesty. But in that silence, something inside me shifted, a soft tremble in the heart, a whisper that said, "Something isn't right." Still, I told myself it was just a phase, that maybe the pressure of school, of being young, had turned her cold. But when you've raised someone, when you've seen them cry, laugh, stumble through childhood and rise again, you know the difference between tiredness and disregard, between frustration and contempt. My daughter was drifting, and I was slowly becoming the ghost in my own home. It was a Saturday in early spring when it happened, the kind of day Marjorie used to love. Cool breeze, blue sky, birds flitting between the dogwood trees she planted out front. Rosa was in the kitchen preparing lunch. I was out on the porch sanding the arm of a rocking chair, trying to smooth out a splinter Lily had pointed out weeks earlier. That morning, Lily had returned home with a group of friends, not for a visit, but for something she called a creative weekend, whatever that meant. They wore bright scarves and carried tablets, speaking in half-sentences full of jargon. Rosa and I exchanged a glance. She gave me that small, knowing smile again, the one that had grown more frequent lately, as if to say, "Brace yourself." Around noon, I came inside to wash my hands. That's when I heard my name. "We just need to move him out. It's not like he needs the whole house." Lily's voice, confident, cold. "He's retired. This place is massive for one person and a maid. I could turn the attic into a studio and rent the rooms out. It's wasted space." "Isn't this technically his house?" one of her friends asked. She scoffed. "My name's already on the deed. I had the papers updated last year when he wasn't paying attention. He trusts me with everything. He signs whatever I put in front of him." My legs froze. My fingertips, still damp from the kitchen sink, started to shake. I pressed my back against the wall outside the living room, listening as she continued. "I'm doing him a favor. Those retirement places have, like, game nights and walking clubs. He'll be better off, honestly. He needs people his age." I turned and quietly walked away, heart pounding in my chest like a drum. I didn't go back to the porch. I went to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the faded photo of Marjorie on the dresser. Her smile still shone, soft and kind. She would have known what to say. I didn't. The next few hours passed like a fog. I didn't eat. Rosa brought me tea, her expression calm but watchful. She didn't ask what was wrong, but she knew. She always knew. That evening, the guests stayed for dinner. I wasn't invited. Rosa prepared a meal I'd paid for in a house I'd built, for people who laughed about redecorating the hallway like it was some outdated museum. Lily came into my room just before dusk. "You okay?" she asked, standing in the doorway like a landlord checking on a tenant. I nodded slowly. "I heard you earlier." Her expression didn't change much. A slight twitch of her mouth, maybe, but no shame. "It's not like that," she said. I need space. And you've always said you wanted me to have a good life." "I did," I said softly, "but I never said it should come at the cost of my own." She sighed. "You wouldn't understand. It's different now. People our age, we network, We collaborate. I need a place to grow. I stood. My knees ached more than usual, but I straightened as tall as I could. This isn't a greenhouse, Lily. It's our home. It's your mother's home. She looked past me at the picture of Marjorie. She wouldn't want you stuck here, clinging to the past. She wouldn't want you erasing it either, I said. We stared at each other for a moment. The distance between us was deeper than the hallway. It was years of quiet fading love, of assumptions, of blind trust and unspoken disappointment. She walked out without another word. The next day, I went to the shed and unlocked an old metal box where I kept important papers. I rifled through files, the deed, the insurance, tax records, and there it was, a new version of the deed, her name next to mine. I had signed it, last June. I remembered now. She had told me it was for banking purposes, something about refinancing. I hadn't read it carefully. I had trusted her. Rosa found me sitting on the back steps, the papers loose in my lap, my eyes distant. She took it, I whispered. She thinks it's already hers, Rosa replied gently. That's worse, I wanted to shout, to slam doors, to scream at the heavens for raising a daughter who now treated me like a burden. But I didn't. I just sat there as the sun dipped behind the trees, remembering the girl who once held my hand and cried because she missed her mother. That little girl was gone, replaced by someone who smiled when I left the room. That night I didn't sleep. I kept thinking of Marjorie's laugh echoing through the hallway, the way she used to sing while folding laundry, how she made Lily say thank you to every guest, every neighbor, every kindness. I wondered what she'd say now. I wondered if she'd still see Lily in this person. By morning, I had made a decision. I didn't know what it would lead to. I only knew I couldn't pretend anymore. Because betrayal isn't just a moment. It's a silence that builds over time until it finally shouts in your face. The next few weeks passed with an eerie normalcy, but beneath the surface, I could feel it. Something was shifting. Lily had returned to campus after her creative weekend, leaving behind a mess of half-used candles, empty wine bottles, and a note scribbled on the fridge. Can you ask Rosa to deep clean the guest rooms before I bring clients over next time? Clients. It was the first time she'd used that word. Not friends, not guests, clients. That's when I started watching more closely. Not like a father, but like a man trying to understand the stranger his daughter had become. Rosa noticed it too. She'd stop and look at me during quiet moments, the way someone might glance at a cracked ceiling, knowing one day it would cave in. She didn't pry. She never did. But she began staying longer after her shift, lingering in the garden, refilling my tea before I asked, folding blankets that were already folded. I'm not blind, she said one afternoon while we watched sparrows flit across the fence. I see what she's doing. I just didn't think she'd do it to you. Neither did I. The next betrayal came quietly, through the vent in the hallway. I was walking past Lily's room when I heard her voice on the phone. No, he hasn't said anything. I think he still doesn't know. Rosa's totally loyal to him, but she's just staff. I can work around her. I froze. There was a pause, then Lily continued. Yes, I've already talked to the broker. We can list the house within the year. But the will needs to be adjusted first. That's the priority. My blood went cold. She was talking to someone, a man by the sound of it. Her voice had that slick, transactional tone, the one she used when discussing apps or internships. But now it was about me, my house, my life. The lawyer said we could argue diminished capacity, she went on. He's not senile, but he's, old school, not good with details. I stood there, my feet planted in place, my heart rattling inside my chest. Diminished capacity. She was building a case, slowly, quietly, turning my age into a weapon. I walked away before I heard any more. I went into the garden and sat beneath the elm tree Marjorie had planted when Lily was born. I stared at the dirt, at the roots that had twisted deep into the ground over the decades, roots that held history, love, struggle, and now they sat beneath a house being prepped for sale behind my back. Later that evening, I called an old friend, Harold, my former neighbor and a semi-retired estate lawyer. "I need to ask you something," I said, "but first, I need you to promise you'll be honest." Harold didn't hesitate. Always. I explained everything. The conversations I'd overheard, the deed she'd changed, the mention of the will. I told him how I'd signed things blindly, trusting her. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. "Wilson, I've seen this before," he said finally, "more often than I care to admit." "What do I do?" he sighed. "Start documenting everything. Don't confront her yet, just watch. And for God's sake, don't sign a single thing without me." That night I sat in my study with a notepad. I wrote down everything I remembered. The phone call, the words she used, the dates of the deed change. I found an old camcorder in the garage and dusted it off, checking the batteries. It still worked. I started recording conversations. I hid the device near the hallway when she came to visit. I backed up documents on a flash drive and locked it in my safe. Rosa noticed the shift in me. "You're quieter than usual," she said one day, scrubbing the sink. "I'm listening now," I replied. One afternoon, I found her in the hallway, staring at a picture on the wall, one of Lily as a toddler, sitting on Marjorie's lap. "She used to hug you like her whole world depended on it," Rosa said. "She used to hug everyone like that," I whispered. Rosa turned to me. "You raised her right, but the world got to her before your values could take root." That line stuck with me. That weekend, I went into the attic and pulled down a dusty box of home videos. VHS tapes, birthdays, snow days, Lily playing the piano, Marjorie dancing in the kitchen with a dish towel in her hand. I sat and watched them for hours, a knot forming in my chest as I remembered the years we'd built together. We weren't perfect, no family is, but there had been so much love, so much effort, and now it was being undone, slowly, strategically, not by accident, but by intent. On Sunday, I overheard her again. She was back in the house briefly and on another call. "He's being more aloof lately," she said. "I think he suspects something. But don't worry. Once the new will is signed, we're golden. Then I can finally fix this place. No more dated curtains and grandma vibes." My fist clenched. I remembered Rosa walking by those curtains last week, touching them gently and saying, "Your wife had good taste. Still feels like she's here when I see these." I didn't feel anger as much as sorrow. Sorrow for the girl I had once known. Sorrow for the home that was slowly being stripped of its soul. But something else grew inside me too. A quiet, burning clarity. She thought I was fragile, that I'd crumble in silence. But she forgot the man who built this house. She forgot I'd already buried the love of my life and kept going. Now, I had to protect something else. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I waited until the timing was right. For days I kept my head down, smiled when Lily texted, nodded when she asked about the weather, as if small talk could cover the cracks spreading between us. But inside, I was sharper than I'd been in years. Watching, recording, writing it all down. Even Rosa noticed the change. "You've got that glint again," she said one morning over tea. "The one you had when you were fixing the roof after the storm in '98. I chuckled softly. That storm was easier to predict. She smiled, but there was worry in her eyes. It was a Thursday afternoon when I decided I couldn't pretend anymore. Lily had returned for another weekend, this time with a man in tow. Well-dressed, smooth-talking, called himself Alex. introduced himself as a financial consultant, though something about the way he avoided eye contact told me he was more shark than shepherd. I caught them in the living room, measuring walls, pointing at fixtures. Lily's voice carried easily across the floorboards. If we knock down this wall, we can create an open concept. People love that now. Alex nodded. And the second floor can be partitioned into separate units, rentable. We could have income in weeks. I stood in the doorway and cleared my throat. Is this still my house, or did I miss the demolition notice? They turned, startled. Lily plastered on a smile. Dad, we were just brainstorming. Nothing's set in stone. I stepped forward slowly. Except maybe the date of my eviction? She laughed nervously. Oh, don't be dramatic. Alex shifted uncomfortably. We didn't mean to. I wasn't talking to you, I said, my voice low and steady. You don't speak for this home. Lily crossed her arms. You've always said you wanted me to take care of things when you got older. That's what I'm doing. No, I said, taking a breath. What you're doing is stealing behind a smile and dragging in strangers to measure the bones of this house before I'm even cold. The silence hung thick. She blinked, caught off guard. She hadn't expected resistance, not from me. Dad, she said, softer now, I'm just trying to build something for myself. This place is so stagnant. You don't even use half the rooms. I may not use them, I said, but I remember who did. Your mother's sewing table is still in the den. Your old school books are on the shelf upstairs. Every creak in these floors carries her voice. And yours, once. Her face twisted. I'm not a little girl anymore. I can't live in a shrine. You're right, I said, but that doesn't mean you get to desecrate it either. She scoffed. You're being unreasonable. This isn't just about feelings. It's about practicality, finances. You don't even need all this space. Rosa practically lives here. I stared at her for a long moment. Rosa respects this house more than you do. That hit her. She looked away. Alex cleared his throat. Maybe I should wait outside. I nodded. Good idea. When he was gone, Lily sat on the couch, arms still folded. I stayed standing. She said nothing for a while. Then, finally, You're really going to fight me on this? I met her eyes. I already am. Her mouth twitched, like she wanted to say more, but she stood up instead. You'll see. I'm not the villain here. I let her walk out, didn't follow, didn't beg. That was the last thread, and it snapped clean. That night I sat with Rosa in the kitchen, the windows open, the cicadas humming. She's moving fast now, I said. Rosa nodded. She's scared. Of me. Of losing control. I looked at her hands, strong, weathered, always moving. She poured tea without asking, then slid a small folder across the table. I've been keeping notes too, she said quietly. I opened it. Dates, times, names, observations. You knew. I suspected, she said, but I didn't want to believe it either. I felt something shift in me, not anger but resolve, not just for myself but for every father who ever gave too much without asking anything in return. The next morning I called Harold again. She's bringing in brokers now, I said. He exhaled sharply. It's time. He walked me through the process, formally updating my will, adding a clause that if it's contested, everything goes to charity. I signed the documents 2 days later in his office, the weight of 100 memories sitting quietly on my shoulders. As we left, he looked at me. You don't seem angry, he said. I'm not, I replied. I'm just done being silent. He smiled sadly. That might be worse for her. I spent the next few days preparing. I cleaned the study, cleared Marjorie's things from storage, filed every document neatly in a safe with Rosa's name as a secondary contact. I wrote a letter to Lily. I didn't send it. I wasn't ready. One night, Rosa and I stood outside watching the sky turn indigo. "She doesn't know who you are anymore," she said softly. I nodded. Then maybe it's time she remembers. Because strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a man sanding a rocking chair while plotting a legacy, one that no one can steal, not even his own blood. Harold greeted me with a firm handshake and a sympathetic smile when I stepped into his office. We'd known each other for decades. Fishing trips, poker nights, the occasional funeral, but never like this. "Wilson," he said, gesturing toward the leather chair across from his desk, "I've cleared the afternoon." I appreciated that. This wasn't going to be quick. Not emotionally, at least. The office hadn't changed since the 90s. Same oak shelves, same frame degrees, same scent of stale pipe smoke Harold never quite got rid of. But the familiarity comforted me. This was a place of clarity, not performance. There were no tapestries or minimalist couches like in Lily's world of stage spaces and curated images. Harold sat down and opened a folder already thick with notes. "You sure about this?" I nodded. She crossed a line. This house was never meant to be currency. He didn't argue. Instead, he slid over a preliminary draft of the new will. "I've structured it so that your assets, the house, your pension, your savings, all go to one of two places. Either Rosa, if she accepts, or a veterans education trust, and we're including a no-contest clause." I looked up. "Explain that again." "If Lily or anyone else tries to fight this in court, they forfeit any claim to the estate. Period. Everything goes to the trust." I let out a slow breath. "That's gonna hurt her." Harold leaned forward. "She's already hurt you, Wilson. This isn't revenge. It's protection." Still, my hands trembled a little as I held the pen. I wasn't a man given to dramatics, but signing that paper, it felt like closing a chapter I never thought would end, like watching a tree fall that you planted with your bare hands. "I raised her better than this," I whispered. Harold placed a hand on my shoulder. "I know." It took nearly an hour to finalize everything. The new will, the notarizations, the clause updates. I added Rosa as the secondary contact for medical and financial decisions if I became incapacitated. I also gave her access to the household accounts, not because I didn't trust myself, but because I trusted her more. Harold looked surprised. "You really believe she'd take care of everything?" "I've already seen her do it," I said, without asking for anything in return. As I signed the last page, I thought of Marjorie. She would have wept at what Lily had become, but I think she would have nodded in quiet approval of this. We were never people who chased money or status. We chased peace, stability, truth. Before I left, Harold handed me an envelope. "Keep this copy at home," he said, "hidden. And if anything changes, your health, your living situation, call me first, not your daughter." That night, I sat at the kitchen table while Rosa cooked. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the air, comforting, familiar. She hummed softly, a song I didn't recognize but liked anyway. "I saw the lawyer," I said finally. She paused, then turned down the stove. "And?" "I changed everything." She turned around, wiping her hands on her apron. "You don't have to tell me the details." "I want to." I told her about the new will, the clause, the trust. She sat down, eyes wide but quiet. "I've never had anyone do something like that for me," she said, almost to herself. "You didn't ask me to," I replied. "That's the difference." She reached out and took my hand. We sat in silence, not needing more words. Later that evening, I locked the copy of the new will in my bedroom safe, then emailed Harold the backup files I'd saved to the flash drive. I labeled it Marjorie's Legacy. That label felt right. This house wasn't just property. It was built on laughter, quiet arguments, late-night puzzles, baby blankets, burned casseroles. It was filled with echoes of a life well lived, and it deserved to be remembered for that, not gutted and flipped for profit. I wrote another letter to Lily that night, not a scolding one, not even a confrontation, just the truth. You were born in the spring, and your mother swore the sun followed you wherever you went. I believed that too, until lately. Now, I see someone else standing where my daughter used to be, and I miss her terribly. I didn't send that letter either, but writing it gave me peace. The following Sunday, I sat with Rosa in the garden, watching the tomatoes ripen in their cages. She asked me what I planned to do next. I shrugged. Wait, watch. Let her make the next move. You don't want to tell her yet? She asked. No, I said, because if I do, she'll just pivot. Make it more subtle, more dangerous. I need her to think she's still winning. Rosa smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. She won't see it coming. I know. She stood and walked toward the hose. As she watered the herbs, I looked around the yard, the same yard where Lily once played dress-up, where Marjorie hung laundry with wooden pins, where I built the swing set that stood, rusted but proud, in the corner. This was my legacy. And now, for the first time, it felt protected, not with fists, not with threats, but with foresight, with documentation, with the quiet power of a father who finally remembered that love sometimes means saying no, especially to those who take you for granted. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the letter came. I was sipping tea in the sunroom, a habit I'd picked up from Marjorie. The windows were open, the air thick with the scent of lilacs, and the only sound was Rosa humming as she folded laundry in the hallway. The peace was broken by the soft clatter of the mail slot. A brown envelope, thick and heavy, slid onto the mat. I didn't recognize the return address, some legal firm downtown. My stomach tightened. I called Rosa over and we opened it together. It was an official notice. Intent to pursue guardianship and property reassignment due to cognitive concern. Signed by Lily. Attached were statements from a doctor I'd never met and notarized affidavits that claimed I was mentally unfit to manage my estate and living arrangements. It was all phrased professionally, respectfully, but the intention was clear. She was trying to take everything, legally, force me into a home, strip me of my rights. Rosa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I sat there frozen, the words blurring on the page. I wasn't crying. Not yet. I was something else entirely. Something hollow, ancient, and terribly familiar. It was betrayal in its purest form. I took the documents into the study and spread them out across the desk. Page after page of cold language, each sentence driving a deeper wedge into my chest. She hadn't even called, hadn't visited in person to check on me. She'd simply decided, consulted lawyers and doctors, drawn her conclusions, and fired her first true shot. And worse, it wasn't just about me anymore. Rosa's name was on one of the documents. There was a thinly veiled accusation that she had been influencing me, manipulating an elderly man for financial gain. "I'll leave," she said, her voice shaking. "If this puts you at risk, I'll go right now." I shook my head. No, that's what she wants. We sat in silence for a long time. The next morning I called Harold and faxed him every page. "Don't panic," he said. "This is a fishing expedition. She's trying to scare you, but we'll hit back, and hard." It was the first time I heard anger in his voice. He filed a formal counterclaim that same afternoon, submitting records of my competency tests, our updated will, financial documents, even video clips of me reading, writing, gardening, and conversing. "You're more lucid than half my clients," he said. "She's going to regret this." But legal steps weren't enough. Not for me. I needed something more. Not revenge, just truth. Visible, undeniable truth. That night, I unlocked the cabinet where Marjorie used to keep our old camcorder tapes. I digitized hours of footage, birthdays, anniversaries, Lily's graduation, even a clip of her saying at 16, "I want to live here forever. This house is magic." I compiled a small folder. Then and now. I saved it to a flash drive and tucked it into the inner pocket of my jacket. The final straw didn't just break the camel's back. It lit the entire barn on fire. I started packing quietly. The original deed, tucked behind a picture frame. The will, both the hard copy and digital backup. The photos of Marjorie and me, our wedding day. Her locket, which I hadn't touched in years. A copy of the report Rosa kept of Lily's broker meetings. Everything. I put them all into a leather satchel. I even printed out Lily's affidavit. Not to confront her with it, but to show others. To make it plain. The time had come to speak. "Are you ready?" Rosa asked, standing in the doorway of my room as I zipped the bag shut. "No," I said, "but I'm done waiting for the perfect moment." She drove me to the church hall that Sunday. The place was crowded. Lily had invited the whole neighborhood for her business announcement, whatever that meant. Balloons, catered trays, music. She was launching her real estate firm, and she was using my house as the flagship listing. I watched from the back as she stood under the fluorescent lights, smiling for cameras, pointing to the poster board with photos of potential properties. One of them was mine. Rosa gripped my hand. "Now?" I nodded. I walked slowly to the front, every eye turning. Murmurs filled the air. Lily's smile froze. "Dad?" she said, voice tight. I took the microphone from her hand gently. "I won't take much of your time," I said, "but since my home is apparently a public listing now, I figured I should speak." There were soft laughs, nervous shifting. I held up the flash drive. "This contains every document you'll need to understand the truth, including a will, a no-contest clause, and evidence of attempted fraud." Gasps echoed. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Fraud?" Lily's face drained of color. "I raised my daughter in a house filled with love," I continued. "She has decided to repay that by trying to declare me senile and take everything I've built. So today, I'm letting you all know, not in private, but in public, that I will no longer be part of this game." I turned to Rosa. "Come on." And we walked out together, calm, certain, dignified. I didn't look back. That night, as the phone buzzed with unanswered calls and Rosa cooked a simple dinner of rice and beans, I finally felt it. The crack that had widened for years had become a canyon, and I wasn't falling in anymore. I was walking away from it, into something new, something honest. And next, it was time to build something no one could take. Not even my own daughter. I never intended to speak again after that night. I thought walking out of Lily's event would be the end of it. But endings are rarely that clean, not in families, not when pride is on the line. A week passed, then two. No apology came, no explanation, just silence, followed by noise. The noise came in the form of social media posts, passive-aggressive emails, and one well-crafted newsletter Lily sent out to her real estate contacts, titled "When Family Gets in the Way of Progress." I don't know what hurt more, her words, or the fact that she didn't even bother to mask who she was talking about. I became the villain in her story. Retired homeowner unable to manage valuable estate. Emotional manipulation by household staff suspected. Rosa found it first. She didn't want to show me, but I insisted. "I have nothing to be ashamed of," I told her. She nodded. "But she does." That's when I knew I had to do one last thing. Not for revenge, but for clarity, for truth. Lily's birthday was coming up, and she was throwing herself a gala at the Historical Society downtown. Black tie, press coverage, influencers, the works. "Are you sure about this?" Harold asked when I told him my plan. "I'm not looking for a fight," I said. "I'm looking for the final word." The night of the event, Rosa helped me into my suit. She tied my tie like Marjorie used to do. Her hands trembled a little, but her smile was steady. "You look like a man who's about to change everything," she whispered. "I just want to stop lying," I replied. The hall was packed. Chandeliers, red carpets, champagne flutes. Lily stood near the front, surrounded by cameras and men in fitted suits. She looked radiant, polished, poised, untouchable, until she saw me. For a moment her eyes widened, then narrowed. She stepped toward me, forcing a smile. "Dad," she said through clenched teeth, "what are you doing here?" "I was invited," I replied calmly. She scoffed. "Who?" "I sent the RSVP myself, under my real name, the one you tried to strip of rights." That caught the attention of the people near us. Whispers started, phones raised. "I don't want a scene," she hissed. "Neither do I. That's why I brought documents instead of shouting." I pulled the envelope from my jacket and handed it to the event coordinator standing nearby. "These are for public record," I said. "If anyone's interested in the truth about the house she's selling, they'll want to read this." Lily reached for it, but the coordinator stepped back, flipping it open. "This contains a full legal will, notarized documents, medical records, and the audio recording of a conversation in which my daughter discusses manipulating my assets." Murmurs turned to gasps. Phones went up, lights flashed. The crowd shifted from admiration to unease. Lily turned red. "This isn't the place." "No," I said, "but you made it the time. You used my house, my legacy, as a launch pad. I have every right to defend it." She turned to the coordinator. "This is harassment." I stepped closer, softening my voice. "No, Lily. Harassment is filing false affidavits to strip your father of his rights. It's calling my nurse a manipulator. It's declaring me incompetent because I wouldn't hand over the deed." Her lip quivered. For the first time she looked small, not out of pity, out of exposure. I didn't stay long. I didn't need to. The crowd had already begun to distance themselves. Some politely turned their backs. A few nodded at me, quiet respect in their eyes. By the time I reached the exit, a reporter followed me out. "Mr. Cartwright," she said, "do you want to make a statement?" I looked at her camera and said, "Family doesn't mean ownership. Love isn't a transaction. And if someone tells you you're too old to know what's right, look closer. They might be hiding something." I walked into the night with Rosa beside me. We drove home in silence. The road stretched dark and empty. She parked the car, and before we got out, she asked quietly, "Do you think she'll ever come back from this?" I stared out the windshield. "I don't know, but I don't need her to." That night, I slept for the first time in months without waking once. The house was still. The past was heavy, but no longer crushing. The next morning, someone had slipped an envelope under the door. It was from Lily. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten in shaky cursive. "You've ruined everything." I folded it carefully, placed it in the back of my drawer, and smiled. Not out of satisfaction, but out of peace. It wasn't about ruining her. It was about protecting myself, about reclaiming the years I gave without question. And for the first time in a long while, I knew I had done just that. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The silence after the storm is unlike any other kind. It isn't peaceful, not at first. It hums in your ears like a leftover tremor, the kind you can't quite shake even though everything looks calm on the surface. For days after the gala, the phone didn't ring. No knocks on the door, no emails, just quiet. The community whispered, "I'm sure of it." I could feel it in the way the mailman paused at the gate, how neighbors crossing the street would glance at the house a little longer than usual. Not cruelly, just curiously, like they weren't sure what they believed, or maybe didn't want to admit they did believe me. It didn't matter. I wasn't ashamed. Still, I couldn't deny the ache, the hollowness. It's funny, you prepare yourself for anger, for confrontation, even for consequences. But no one tells you to prepare for the loneliness that follows when the truth finally lands. Even Rosa grew quieter. She was still kind, still made breakfast and reminded me to take my pills, but I could tell the whole ordeal had rattled her. She took longer walks in the evenings. Sometimes I'd see her out the window, sitting by the rose bushes Marjorie once planted, just staring at the ground. "Are you all right?" I asked one night as we sat by the fireplace. She looked over at me with tired eyes. "I think I'm just sad for you." I nodded. Me too. That was the only truth either of us could say out loud. I spent a lot of time in the study after that, rereading old letters from Marjorie, flipping through albums, running my fingers along the spines of books I hadn't opened in years, each one a memory, each corner of the house echoing a name I didn't hear anymore. I thought of Lily as a baby, her curls, her chubby cheeks, the way she'd wrap her arms around my neck and fall asleep on my chest. I remembered the first time she said "da-da," how I wept quietly in the kitchen while Marjorie held her. Where had it all gone? I wasn't bitter, not exactly, just tired. But something happened on the 5th day after the gala. I was walking back from the local market, a ritual I insisted on keeping even though Rosa always offered to go. My hands were full of apples and canned beans when I noticed a young woman waiting at the gate. She looked no more than 18, nervous. She had a clipboard and wore a navy vest with the town council logo. "Mr. Cartwright?" she asked. I nodded. "That's me." She cleared her throat. "I'm part of the Community Preservation Program. We're starting a project to record stories of older residents, their memories, history, things like that. Would you be interested?" I blinked. "You want to hear from me?" Her cheeks flushed. After the gala, people started asking questions about the house, your story. Some of us, we think there's more to learn from people like you. I didn't know what to say, so I handed her an apple. She laughed. "So is that a yes?" I smiled, the first real smile in days. "It's a maybe. Come back tomorrow." And she did. Her name was Clara, a college student, studying history and journalism. She sat in the living room with her little recorder and listened as I told her about the house, how Marjorie and I laid the floorboards ourselves, how we couldn't afford a crib when Lily was born, so I carved one from leftover pine, how every nick and stain on the kitchen counter had a story behind it. She asked thoughtful questions, took notes, never once looked at me like I was broken. After an hour, she turned off the recorder and said, "This place feels like someone really lived here." I laughed softly. Someone did, a lot of someones. When she left, Rosa found me sitting at the window, smiling to myself. "What's gotten into you?" she asked. "Maybe nothing," I said. "Maybe something." That weekend, Harold stopped by. He brought a manila folder filled with clippings. The gala had made a small splash. A few local blogs picked it up. There was even a column titled, "When Parents Say No, a Lesson in Elder Autonomy." "Public opinion's leaning your way," Harold said. "That's rare, but deserved." I didn't care much for public opinion, but I appreciated the thought. Before he left, he said, "You could do something with this house, something new." I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Open it to students, veterans, make it more than a home." The idea sat with me for days. I wandered room to room thinking about what it would mean to open these doors. not just to guests, but to new beginnings. Marjorie had always said, "A house isn't worth the walls, it's worth the welcome inside." Maybe it was time to start welcoming again, not the family who turned away from me, but the people walking towards something honest. That night I sat in the living room, pen in hand, pad on my knee, and I wrote one sentence. What if the house became more than memory? And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for Lily to come back. I was waiting for something better to begin. I'd spent most of my life holding on, to memories, to tradition, to people who no longer held me in the same way. But after Clara's visit and Harold's offhand remark, something shifted. A thought I hadn't dared entertain before started to grow roots. What if this house, the one Lily once tried to take, could become something more? I didn't know what that meant exactly, not yet, but I knew I couldn't just let it sit in silence anymore, growing old with me. The next morning, I opened the front room windows. The breeze came in like a baptism. Rosa raised an eyebrow from the hallway. "You spring cleaning or starting a revolution?" she asked, smiling. "Little of both," I replied. We started by clearing the rooms. Old guest rooms that hadn't been used in years, stuffed with boxes of Marjorie's books and dusty linens, were cleaned and aired. The sewing room, once Lily's childhood art corner, was turned into a reading nook. Rosa helped me sort through Marjorie's quilting supplies, careful not to throw out what we might use later. "I want to turn this place into something good," I told her, as we packed away photo frames. "A place where people feel safe, seen." Rosa paused, holding a framed picture of Marjorie. "She'd love that. She always had a soft spot for strays and wanderers." "Then maybe I'm just honoring her legacy." Within a week I had a clearer vision. Not a shelter, not quite a hostel. Something in between. A transitional home for young women starting over, students who had aged out of foster care, single mothers taking night classes, immigrants waiting for papers, people like Clara who just needed a place to think and breathe. I contacted Harold first. "Is it even legal?" I asked him. "To do this without becoming some formal charity?" He grinned. "Legal, yes. Complicated, also yes. But we'll make it work. You'd be running what's called a private transitional residence. You're allowed to house guests, especially if you're not charging rent in a traditional sense." "I don't want rent," I said. "I want responsibility and kindness, that's all." He nodded. "Then that's what we'll set up." Paperwork was filed, city permits reviewed. Clara offered to help write a mission statement and set up a website. She called it Marjorie's House. I didn't even suggest the name. "I figured it should honor where the love started," she said. I sat on the porch that afternoon reading the draft. Marjorie's house is a haven for those seeking direction, dignity, and a roof that doesn't judge them. Founded by a man who learned that family isn't always who you raise, but who rises with you. I teared up reading that, not out of sadness, out of something deeper, a sense of purpose I thought had been taken from me. Rosa began preparing guest rooms with me. She painted walls, sewed curtains from Marjorie's old fabric. She even taught Clara how to bake bread one weekend, their laughter filling the halls like music. We decided to start small, 2 rooms open, no more. The goal wasn't quantity, it was quality, safety, healing. One of the first applicants was a 22-year-old named Hannah. She was aging out of the foster system and starting night classes in social work. Her email was tentative, almost apologetic. "I don't know if I qualify," she wrote, "but I promise I'm trying." I invited her over for tea. She was polite, nervous, gripping the hem of her sleeve the way Lily used to when she was unsure. "You don't need to qualify," I told her. "You just need to want to belong." She moved in 2 days later. Watching her unpack a single duffel bag into the room that used to be Lily's made me emotional, but not in the way I expected. There was no bitterness, only grace. Another girl came a week later, a waitress trying to save for school. She shared the second room. Rosa made them both warm soup that night. We ate in the kitchen like a real family, not bound by blood but by choice. Harold stopped by to drop off a new lease agreement I needed to sign. "You know this could grow," he said. "You might get more applicants than you can handle." "I'll cross that bridge when I get there," I said. "For now, I just want to make sure the first two feel like they have a home." Clara took pictures for the website. Rosa posed reluctantly beside a pan of cornbread. I stood under the porch awning, holding Marjorie's photo, and smiled for the camera. I didn't look like a man who'd been cast aside. I looked like a man who finally stepped into the life he deserved. Late one night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood in the hallway and looked at the light under each door. Once, those doors were closed to me. Now, they were open, and behind them lived women who weren't afraid of what I represented, who didn't think I was embarrassing or outdated or in the way. They thought I was someone who offered a light in the dark, and that was worth more than any inheritance I could have handed to Lily. It was legacy reborn. It was love given freely, and it was just the beginning. A month passed, then two. The seasons began to shift. The dogwoods bloomed along the walkway, just like they had every year since Marjorie planted them. Only now the petals fell onto sneakers instead of slippers. Young women walking to class, to part-time jobs, to lives that hadn't quite figured themselves out yet. Marjorie's house was growing, not just in numbers, but in spirit. It started with Hannah, of course. She brought home a friend from her social work class one evening. A girl named Mimi who'd been couch surfing after a bad breakup with a roommate. "She's not asking to stay," Hannah said quickly, almost pleading. "She just needed somewhere warm for a night." I looked at Mimi, a quiet girl with downcast eyes and hands shoved deep into a frayed hoodie pocket. "Dinner's almost ready," I said. "You eat, then we'll talk." She ended up staying 2 weeks, then applying officially. Now she helps Rosa in the mornings with breakfast and does everyone's laundry without being asked. I didn't see it happening at first. I was too busy fixing doors, replacing light bulbs, dealing with the little bureaucracies of making sure the town didn't shut me down for being too generous. But one night, I stood in the doorway of the living room and saw something that caught me off guard. The girls were on the floor. A game of Uno spread between them. Laughter. Someone was baking banana bread. The television was on low, not for watching, but for company. And in that moment, I realized this was family, not the kind that shares your name, the kind that shares your peace. Rosa sat next to me on the love seat, sipping her tea. "You see it, don't you?" she whispered. I nodded slowly. "I do." It wasn't just them, either. Neighbors began to notice, in a good way. One brought over a box of books she'd been meaning to donate. Another, a young vet who ran a landscaping business, offered to fix the front yard for free. "House like this deserves to shine," he said. I paid him anyway, not in cash, but in dinners. A plate of Rosa's stew, a slice of Clara's chocolate cake. Community, served warm. Soon people started dropping by, not because they needed something, but because they wanted to give something. A retired teacher offered tutoring once a week. An old nurse dropped off basic medical supplies. One woman brought yarn and offered to teach the girls how to knit. "They're not projects," I told her gently. She smiled. "I know, they're pioneers." That word stayed with me. Pioneers. Because that's what they were. Not survivors, not victims. They were building something new, out of pain, out of history, out of the very rooms where Lily once slammed doors and told me I was embarrassing. I didn't think of her often anymore. When I did, it was mostly quiet sadness. not anger. Sometimes, in the still of the night, I'd remember her as a little girl, the way she clung to my hand at the beach, how she used to cry when Marjorie left the room, only to fall asleep in my arms 10 minutes later. I missed that version of her, the one who hadn't learned how to shame people for growing old. But I had stopped mourning the loss of who she became. I was too full of new beginnings. One evening, as I sat outside with a mug of tea, someone called from the sidewalk. "Mr. Cartwright." I looked up. A young man with kind eyes and a camera bag over his shoulder stepped forward. "I'm Ben," he said. "I'm Clara's boyfriend." Clara had mentioned him briefly. He was quiet, a little shy. "She talks about you all the time," he said. "Says this place changed her." I smiled. "She's done a fair bit of changing herself." He looked around the porch, the blooming flowers, the sound of laughter drifting through the screen door. "I was wondering, would you mind if I made a short film about this place? Just a few interviews. For school." I didn't say yes immediately, but I didn't say no either. He came back the next day with his camera, set it up in the living room, interviewed Hannah, Mimi, Rosa, even me. He asked gentle questions, thoughtful ones. "Do you think this house is what you hoped for?" he asked me. I looked at the worn rug, the hand-sewn curtains, the books on the shelf with sticky notes from Clara's latest project. "It's more," I said. "It's proof that family isn't something you're born into. It's something you earn, and something you give." He nodded, camera still rolling. That night, Clara watched the footage with tears in her eyes. "I want to submit this to the State Student Festival," she said. "People should see what this house means." I didn't argue. If Marjorie's house could be a story, a light, then let it shine. The next weekend, we had our first real gathering. Just a potluck, really. Everyone brought something. We set up folding tables in the backyard. String lights dangled from the trees. There was music, soft and nostalgic. Rosa wore her best apron. I wore Marjorie's favorite flannel shirt. Neighbors came, friends, strangers who'd heard through the grapevine. And as I looked around at the clinking glasses, the shared recipes, the spontaneous dancing, I realized something profound. This wasn't a replacement for the family I lost. This was the family I was always meant to find. Chosen, earned, real. Have you ever found family where you least expected it? Tell us your story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful true-life journeys. It was early spring again. The dogwoods had just started blooming, and Rosa was out front with Mimi, planting tulips near the porch. Clara was inside, printing flyers for the local Women's Resource Center. We were hosting a free brunch the following weekend. Everything had settled into a rhythm. Then I saw the black car pull up across the street. At first, I thought it was a delivery driver or a curious neighbor. But then the back door opened, and my heart paused mid-beat. Lily stepped out. She wore sunglasses, though it wasn't bright. Her coat looked expensive, the kind of beige wool that needed dry cleaning tags. She stood still for a moment, staring at the house as if uncertain what year she had arrived in. I opened the screen door quietly. She noticed. We locked eyes across the yard, and for a second, we were two people frozen in time. Not father and daughter, not past and present, just unfinished business. She stepped onto the sidewalk, heels clicking slowly toward the gate. Clara glanced out the window and froze. Rosa looked up from the flower bed, eyes narrowing slightly. "Do you want me to?" she began. I shook my head. "I've got it." I met Lily at the gate. Didn't open it for her. Just leaned on it. "Didn't expect to see you," I said. She removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with red. She looked older than I remembered, still beautiful, but worn. "I wasn't sure I'd come," she replied. Silence stretched between us. "I saw the video," she said finally. "The one Clara's boyfriend made. It was everywhere." So Ben had posted it, probably with Clara's blessing. I hadn't seen the final version, but I'd heard it was touching. "You said something in it," Lily continued, looking away. "Family isn't something you're born into." That stuck. I didn't respond. She glanced around. "It looks different. The house. It feels different too." She looked down at her hands. "Dad, I came because I needed to say something. I stayed quiet, not to be cruel, just to listen. I messed up," she said. "Badly. And I thought time would dull it or, I don't know, fix it somehow." "It doesn't," I said gently. "No," she whispered. "It doesn't." Her voice cracked. "I've been seeing someone, a therapist. She told me I should apologize, not because it'll change anything, but because it's right." My throat tightened. She took a deep breath. "I treated you horribly. I let my pride, my need to impress, get in the way of love. I pushed you out of your own life, and I let my children believe that was normal. I'm sorry, Dad, truly." For a long time I just stared at her. She meant it. I could feel it. The sincerity wasn't theatrical. It was broken, quiet, like someone who'd finally felt the weight of their own silence. "I appreciate that," I said. "I do." She looked up, hopeful. "But forgiveness," I continued, "isn't a switch you flip. It's a door you build, slowly." She nodded. "I understand." We stood in silence again. From inside the house I heard laughter, Clara and Mimi arguing over who left the blender running. "I found peace here," I said, "with people who didn't share my blood but share my values. Respect, warmth, patience." "I can see that," she whispered. "I don't say this to hurt you, but to be honest, I can't give you back what you gave away." "I know. But I hope, one day, you find what I did." Her eyes filled with tears. Then she surprised me. "Do you think Clara would ever want to talk to me?" I hesitated. "She might," I said. "One day. That's her decision now." She nodded, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "This is for her. I won't ask you to give it to her. Just let her know I came." I took the envelope. She stepped back, sunglasses trembling slightly as she raised them to her face. "I'm proud of what you've built," she said. And with that, she turned and walked away. No hugs, no dramatic breakdowns, just the soft sound of heels on pavement and the quiet dignity of a woman finally learning how to say sorry. I stood at the gate for a long while. Eventually Clara came out onto the porch, squinting. "Was that?" I nodded. She walked over, stood beside me. "She looked different," Clara said. "She is." She glanced at the envelope in my hand. "For me." I nodded again, holding it out. Clara took it, turned it over slowly. Then she looked up at me. "Do I have to read it?" "No," I said. "Not unless you want to." She held the letter close to her chest for a moment, then slipped it into her pocket. "I think I'll wait." And that was enough. Forgiveness doesn't come with a parade. It's quiet, complicated. Sometimes the best we can do is open the door a crack, not to let the past back in, but to let it go. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The morning sun spilled through the lace curtains, casting warm patterns on the hardwood floors. Floors that had seen decades of footsteps, laughter, and, lately, a new kind of life. I stood in the kitchen, the smell of fresh bread and brewing coffee filling the air. Rosa was humming softly as she arranged a tray of pastries, while Clara flipped through a cookbook, her eyes alight with plans. Today was special. The official opening of Marjorie's house, not just as a shelter or a project, but as a home reborn. I walked through each room one last time before guests arrived. The guest rooms had blossomed from dusty storage spaces to cozy retreats, filled with fresh linens and hand-stitched quilts Rosa had made from scraps of Marjorie's old fabric. The living room was vibrant with plants Clara had nurtured, and the walls bore photos of every smiling face that had passed through these doors. I paused by the mantel, where Marjorie's photo stood in its usual place. I whispered her name, feeling the quiet strength of her presence. "You would have loved this," I said softly. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my reverie. Guests began arriving, neighbors, friends, local officials, even some of the young women who had found refuge here. Their faces shone with gratitude and hope, and the warmth in the room was tangible. Clara stepped forward, her voice steady and proud as she welcomed everyone. "Marjorie's house is more than just a building. It's a promise that no one is alone and that family can be chosen and built with love." She smiled at me and Rosa, and I felt a swell of pride, not for what I had done alone, but for what we had all created together. During the ceremony, a local reporter approached me for an interview. She asked about the journey, about the pain, the betrayal, and the transformation. I told her, "This house has seen everything: joy, sorrow, love, loss. But what matters is what you do after the darkness. You build a new light. You find new family." Later, as the afternoon sun softened, I sat on the porch with Rosa, watching the children playing in the yard and the young women chatting on the steps. "I think Marjorie would be proud," I said. Rosa smiled. "I know she is." As dusk settled, Clara joined us with a small cake, homemade, decorated simply with wildflowers. We sang "Happy Birthday" to the house, marking a new beginning. I thought about Lily, about the door that had opened just a crack weeks before, about forgiveness and the paths we choose. This house, Marjorie's house, was no longer just mine or hers. It belonged to everyone who walked through its doors seeking warmth, safety, and a second chance. That night, as I lay in the room that used to be mine, now filled with the soft breathing of new lives, I whispered into the quiet, "They tried to take it all, but love built this home, and it still stands. And it would stand for many years to come."